Picture this: an emperor so wild and unpredictable that even his own grandmother, the one who put him in power, had to step in and take him down. This isn't a fantasy novel. This is the story of Elagabalus, Rome's teenage emperor, whose reign was one of the most bizarre and scandalous chapters in the empire's history. It's a tale of lavish parties, shocking rituals, and a clash of cultures so intense it brought an empire to its knees. Stick around as we uncover the wild, 4-year rule of the emperor who went too far. Let's set the scene. It's the year 218 AD. The Roman Empire is in turmoil. The beloved, if brutal, Emperor Caracalla has been assassinated. His successor, a prefect named Macrinus, is unpopular and seen as a usurper. In the province of Syria, a powerful and ambitious family seize their chance. This is the Severan dynasty, and at its heart is a formidable woman named Julia Maesa. She has a grandson, a charismatic 14-year-old boy named Varius Avitus Bassianus. He is the high priest of the local sun god, Elagabal. Julia Maesa, a political genius, concocts a brilliant plan. She spreads a rumor that her grandson is actually the illegitimate son of the assassinated Caracalla. This was pure political gold. The soldiers, still loyal to Caracalla's memory, were easily swayed. They saw in this young priest a link to their old leader. With the army's backing, Macrinus was defeated and killed. And just like that, at the tender age of 14, the boy priest from Syria became the most powerful man in the world, the new emperor of Rome. He took the name of his god, and from then on, he would be known as Elagabalus. The Romans expected a new ruler who would bring stability. What they got was a culture shock of epic proportions. Elagabalus didn't just come to Rome. He brought his god with him, and not just as a personal deity, but as the new supreme god of the entire Roman pantheon. He declared that Elagabal, represented by a black conical stone from Syria, was now superior to Jupiter, the king of the Roman gods. This was more than just a religious change. It was a fundamental attack on Roman identity. The Senate, the aristocracy, and the common people were horrified. Their traditions, stretching back centuries, were being tossed aside by a teenager who didn't seem to understand or care about their values. He built a magnificent temple for his god on the Palatine Hill, calling it the Elagabalium. He then proceeded to force the most sacred relics of Rome, the eternal flame of Vesta, the shields of Mars, the stone of the Great Mother, to be moved into this new temple, making them subservient to his foreign god. It was a symbolic act of domination that alienated everyone. He even tried to arrange a marriage between his god, Elagabal, and the Roman goddess Minerva. When that didn't quite work, he picked the Carthaginian goddess Tanit instead. The entire religious establishment of Rome was thrown into chaos. But Elagabalus's eccentricities didn't stop with religion. His personal life was a spectacle of excess that made even the most decadent emperors look tame. He had a passion for lavish clothing, preferring silk and jewel-encrusted robes to the traditional Roman toga. He wore makeup, wigs, and was said to have offered vast sums of money to any physician who could surgically change his gender. A concept so far beyond Roman understanding that it was seen as proof of his madness. His feasts were legendary for their absurdity. He would serve his guests meals where every single dish was the same color. Imagine a blue dinner or a green dinner. He would release tame lions and leopards among his guests during dessert, just to watch them panic. Don't worry, the big cats were harmless. But it certainly wasn't a relaxing dining experience. In one infamous story, he supposedly smothered some of his dinner guests under a torrent of flower petals released from a false ceiling. While this might be an exaggeration, it captures the essence of how he was perceived. Unpredictable, cruel, and obsessed with his own amusement at others' expense. He loved pranks. He'd serve his less favored guests replica food made of wax or wood while he feasted on the real thing. He'd seat them on inflatable cushions that would deflate during the meal, dumping them onto the floor. He even once unleashed a swarm of non-stinging, but very frightening insects on the public during the games. These weren't the actions of a statesman. They were the actions of a child with unlimited power and zero accountability. The political and military elite were not amused. The Senate, which he openly despised, was forced to watch as he appointed his cronies to the highest offices. His chariot driver became the commander of the city guard. His barber was put in charge of the grain supply. He reportedly ran a lottery where the prizes ranged from a grand villa to a dead dog. Competence and experience meant nothing. Loyalty to Elagabalus and his whims was all that mattered. He scandalized Roman society with his series of marriages. In just 4 years, he had 5 wives. One of them was a Vestal Virgin, a priestess sworn to 30 years of celibacy. To marry a Vestal was a sacrilege of the highest order, an act punishable by death for both parties in normal times. But Elagabalus was not living in normal times. He declared that this union was fitting, as a marriage between a priest and a priestess would produce godlike children. Rome was aghast. As his behavior grew more erratic, his popularity, which was already non-existent, plummeted. The real power behind the throne, his grandmother Julia Maesa, began to worry. She had orchestrated his rise to power, but now she saw that he was a liability. His bizarre actions were threatening to bring down the entire Severan dynasty. The soldiers who had put him on the throne were now disgusted by him. His obsession with his Syrian god and his effeminate ways were an insult to their military values. Julia Maesa knew she needed a backup plan. And that plan was Elagabalus's younger cousin, the 12-year-old Severus Alexander. Alexander was everything Elagabalus was not. He was serious, dignified, and respectful of Roman traditions. Maesa began promoting Alexander, persuading Elagabalus to adopt him as his heir and grant him the title of Caesar. Elagabalus, perhaps sensing a rival, quickly grew jealous. He tried to strip Alexander of his titles and even attempted to have him assassinated, but this was a fatal miscalculation. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's own bodyguards, had come to favor the young, stable Alexander over the chaotic Elagabalus. When Elagabalus ordered them to act against his cousin, they refused. They had had enough. In March of 222 AD, the situation reached its breaking point. Elagabalus, sensing the tide had turned against him, made a desperate last stand. He and his mother, Julia Maesa, barricaded themselves in a fort at the Praetorian camp. It was no use. The soldiers stormed the fort, and the final grim act of the tragedy unfolded. The 18-year-old emperor was found hiding, some say in a latrine. He and his mother were dragged out and killed on the spot. Their bodies were mutilated and paraded through the streets of Rome. In a final act of humiliation, the body of the emperor who had so offended Roman sensibilities was dragged to the Tiber River and thrown in. The black stone of his god was unceremoniously shipped back to Syria. The Senate officially condemned his memory, a process known as damnatio memoriae, attempting to erase his name and his reign from history. So what is the legacy of Elagabalus? For centuries, he was seen as the ultimate example of a bad emperor, a depraved tyrant whose reign was a brief, insane interruption in Roman history. Ancient historians, writing for the Senate and the new regime, painted him in the worst possible light, and many of their more sensational stories are likely exaggerations. But a more modern perspective might see him differently. Was he truly mad? Or was he a teenager from a different culture trying to impose his own traditions on a rigid and unforgiving society? He was a product of the East, where divine kingship and flamboyant displays of power were the norm. In Rome, these same behaviors were seen as tyrannical and foreign. He was a story of a culture clash, a boy who was handed the world but had no idea what to do with it. His failure wasn't just a personal one, it was a failure of two worlds to understand each other. The story of Elagabalus is a cautionary tale about power, culture, and the danger of going too far, too fast. It shows that even the absolute ruler of the Roman Empire was not above the will of the people and the army. His reign was short, chaotic, and ultimately tragic, but it remains one of the most unforgettable and fascinating stories from the ancient world. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this dive into one of history's wildest reigns interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the past. Let me know in the comments what you think. Was Elagabalus a mad tyrant or a misunderstood teen? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious.